Hey guys, what's up? I'm Sci High. I hope we've all been climbing higher on the ladder and enjoying the deluge of new Kamigawa previews that have come out today. It's been pretty exciting to look at. Welcome back to already existing subscribers. If you're not already subscribed to my content, please like and subscribe. I very much appreciate it so we can help grow this content. Now, with that out of the way, I'm excited to talk about another powerful historic deck today that I've been having some success with. And oh, by the way, it looks like they have fixed the mythic icon finally in Magic Arena, which is nice because I was really annoying using that old weird icon. I don't know what happened there. Anyways, so I'm excited to show you this deck. It's not necessarily a new archetype, but the way I'm trying to brew it may be a little bit of a divergence of what other people have done before. But before I share it, I just want to say, when we look at some of the most powerful decks in Magic's history, there's different categories that things fall into. What I mean by that is like decks that have a ton of interaction and disruption to mess with what your opponent is doing, while we have decks on the other end of the spectrum that totally ignore what the opponent is doing and rather just try to do something extremely busted and do it as fast as possible and consistently as possible. And then we also have decks that are kind of in the middle of those two extremes that do something busted, maybe a combo, but they also have a lot of disruption of their own and ways to interact with the opponent. So the deck I want to share today kind of falls in the middle, although I am building it to be as consistent and powerful as possible while generally kind of ignoring what the opponent is doing, at least to some extent, as I'll show you. So what we're talking about here, of course, is the Sage of the Falls Locust God combo. Real quickly, I'll just talk about the basics of the deck, just in case there's anyone watching that's not familiar. Then I'll talk about strategy and how I've been playing it. I've been experimenting with a lot of decks lately and fell to like 93% Mythic and just roared back to 99%, briefly touching rank status with this deck again, and I continue to try to grind it and refine it and make it better. But so we'll talk about advanced like play strategy with this and in my individual card choices, but let's just get the basics out of the way first of all. So if you're not already familiar with Sage of the Falls or the Locust God, basically when these two cards get into play, what you're going to ultimately do and what's going to happen is you're going to create infinite, well, not infinite, but almost effectively as many 1/1 blue locusts as we have equal to cards left in our deck. Because the Locust God reads, whenever you draw a card, you get to create a 1/1 blue and red insect with flying and haste. That haste is important so we can win immediately when this combo goes off. But then Sage of the Falls says, whenever Sage of the Falls or another non-human creature enters the battlefield in our control, we draw a card, and if we do, we discard a card. So basically, we can just continually chain draw cards off the top of our library to get, 20, 30, 1/1 blue, red locusts into play and kill our opponent that way. And you can just win by naturally playing these cards, which is slow and cumbersome. But what this deck strives to do, of course, is use Indomitable Creativity to cheat these two cards into play immediately. So the basics of what we're trying to do is get two artifacts or two creatures into play, and they have to be tokens because we're only using these two creatures in the entire deck, which creates some very interesting kind of like apprehensive, nerve-wracking play experiences, as I'll talk about as we get into just how this kind of plays out. But these are the only two creatures in our deck. So what we do with Indomitable Creativity, if you're not already familiar with this, you're destroying two artifacts that you own and or two creatures that you own, and then you reveal cards from the top of your library until you find a creature to replace those two things that were replaced. So naturally you just you kill two treasure tokens, or you kill two blue crabs created by a hard evidence. You immediately dump these two creatures into play and automatically win the game. So a lot of people that build this deck, they kind of build like a half and half shell of disruption and finding and executing the combo. I've got a little bit of disruption here, but I'm mostly just aiming at for like a best of one scenario where I'm just trying to, as reliably and consistently as possible, launch this combo on turn 4. And actually, with a God draw, the way I've configured this deck, you can actually go off and do it on turn 3, which is not super likely, but it already has happened to me a few times. So let's look at how we would do that. Let's start off with, let's go through the individual card choices I have here now. But to enable a turn 3 victory with this deck, what you need is a turn 1 hard evidence, which is going to create a 0/3 blue crab token, and it's also going to create a clue token. So there is your ammunition, so to speak, or your sources of artifact and creature tokens to launch the Indomitable Creativity. So on turn 1, you play hard evidence. Now on turn 2, if you happen to have 2 strike at riches, you can create 2 more treasure tokens. So now turn 3 rolls around, you now have access to 5 total mana, including 3 red, of course, with the treasures and other dual lands, which you need the 3 red. But what you're looking to do is get to 5 mana. Now on turn 3, we can kill the use the treasure tokens for 5 mana, cast Indomitable Creativity, killing a token and a clue, a crab and a clue, and now we just won on turn 3, assuming our opponent has no disruption. So we launch and we get these 2 creatures into play as early as turn 3. Now, if our opponent does have disruption in the form of either, it could be almost anything. It could be a counter spell that they try to counter our Indomitable Creativity, but you're also susceptible to artifact and creature hate, because you have to target your own artifact tokens or creature tokens. And of course, if somebody were to fatal push or lightning bolt, whatever, kill this in response, it will no longer be there when Indomitable Creativity resolves. Thus, you won't get to combo off and get your creatures. So knowing this, good players will wait for you to cast Indomitable Creativity and see what you do, and then they will respond by trying to take out one of your artifacts or your crabs that you target with Indomitable Creativity. Now, to try to hedge and be prepared against this possibility, we've got 3 Pact of Negations floating around, which is a very interesting card that I could consider even going up to as many as 4 copies. So maybe you're familiar with this, you already see where this is going, but with Pact of Negation, we can counter a spell for free. We just have to pay a pact cost of 5 mana on our next upkeep. But that doesn't matter. Even if we can't pay that, it doesn't matter. If we just win the game, who cares? It's a free counterspell. So Pact of Negation is pretty sick here. Also, when the combo goes off, maybe it's possible that they couldn't stop the immediate combo, like they couldn't counter the creativity, or they didn't have a way to kill one of your tokens that you targeted. But maybe they have something else to react once you actually attack, like the card that removes all attacking creatures from combat, or some sort of effect like that. It's not important, but if they have something like that, what's interesting with Pact of Negation and the fact that we basically get to draw our entire library if we want to, we can find these Pact of Negations and have further backup to anything that they can potentially respond with at that point, which is just something to keep in mind that may come up. Most of the times, if people have disruption, they're going to try to disrupt it right away before you even go off, before these creatures even hit the board. But that is just something that does come up from time to time. So when you're going off with this deck, it's important to be aware of what you keep drawing and discarding, because generally it doesn't really matter, but you should be aware and want to keep the Pact of Negations just for this nuanced situation that I described, where it might actually be the difference of winning or losing. So as you're ripping through your whole deck, just hold on to these Pact of Negations once you find them, if you run this exact configuration that I'm suggesting. Now, moving on, we need to talk about another important aspect of this deck, which is really strange. It's one of the most interesting decks I've ever really played. This deck is kind of like modern of years ago with Splinter Twin. I'm not necessarily equating it on the same power level as that, because our combo goes off at sorcery speed. However, it is another red-blue deck with a combo of making essentially virtual infinite tokens. So, and we have lots of other forms of disruption ourselves, which is kind of like that deck. But anyways, the interesting thing about this deck is that while it's so powerful and so consistent, there's this weird situation where, being that you only have one copy of each of these critical cards, and you can probably tell already, even if you're not familiar with the deck, that you can't exactly execute the combo, well, you can't at all, while one of these or both of them are in your hand. So you really don't want these cards in your hand. You want them in your deck to find with Indomitable Creativity and cheat them into play that way. So to deal with that problem, when we draw these cards, we've got 4 copies of Fire Prophecy, which also fulfills just a general disruption creature kill role, in that it is 2 mana, deal 3 damage to target creature, but we may put a card from our hand on the bottom of our library, and if we do, we can draw a card. So this fulfills a big role in this deck, in that it saves you, allows you to tuck these cards, the Locust God or the Sage of the Falls, back under your library if you happen to get it in your hand. We can also kill a creature to try to survive into extra turns so that we can execute our combo. And also, even if we don't need to tuck a card under on the bottom of our deck, it's possible that we just need to keep fishing to find an Indomitable Creativity, or find a way to maybe make an extra treasure token so that we have the ammo to target with Indomitable Creativity to go off and execute our combo. So Fire Prophecy does all of this, and it's so important even that there are situations, which is unfortunate and obviously not an ideal play pattern, but we have to be able to use this, we do have to target a creature. It's possible against another control deck where maybe they don't have other creatures that we can target. If we're desperate and we absolutely have to get Sage of the Falls or Locust God out of our hand and back in the library, keep in mind you can target your own crab, kill your own crab, which is not ideal, we don't want to do, but if we absolutely have to get one of these cards under our deck, we can fall back and we can do that. It's not the end of the world, it's just a 0/3 crab. We've got more than enough ways to create the necessary ammunition to go off with Indomitable Creativity. I haven't looked at a ton of lists for this deck, but I haven't seen many. Maybe I just was missing them using Strike It Rich. To me, this seems like a very powerful card in here that fits the archetype. I've been really happy with running 4 copies. Like I said, without Strike It Rich, there's no way you can go off as early as turn 3, at least with this configuration. This is what enables the potential to actually go off with this combo on turn 3. The flashback is nice as well. This card just helps ensure that we always have at least 2 artifacts or 2 creatures to target. Hard Evidence is obviously the best for this deck, a 1 mana to create 2 tokens to use for Indomitable Creativity. However, Strike It Rich, it's very similar effect in that it has flashback, and the fact that it's creating treasures is very relevant as well, because we want to get to 5 mana as fast as possible. So I see these 2 cards as really like brother and sister in the deck. They do it all. These are what enable the deck to really function and go off. So we talked about these and the Fire Prophecy. We move along and we get to obviously Indomitable Creativity, the main backbone, the whole point of the combo. And we just talked about the need to tuck cards under when we accidentally have these in our hand. To further allow us to do that, we've got 4 Valakut Awakenings, which says as an instant for 3, we can put any number of cards from our hand on the bottom of our library, then we draw that many cards plus 1. So just another avenue to be able to get these out of our hand and safely in our library where we need them. And on the bottom of our library is the best place for them to be, really, because they're the safest there from being milled. I talked about the kind of the interesting, weird, like kind of nerve-wracking play patterns with this deck. Is it's so interesting that you have two cards that are only one copy that are absolutely critical, and they need to be in your library. So that means things that mill you are particularly gut-wrenching when it happens, because when you're being milled, there's always the potential that one of these things is milled out of your deck, and that's game over. That's no good. Now you're missing your combo, and there's not a lot of ways with this deck to win conventionally outside of the combo. This is really kind of an all-in or nothing on this combo, which I know it doesn't sound good, but in just best of one grinding, it can be just soul crushing, really. I mean, you can just punk other decks out of the format that just aren't prepared to handle this. And even if they are, you've got the Pact of Negations to hedge against that. I mean, I've been amazed sometimes, totally lucky for sure, where I've beaten control decks where I just happen to have two Pact of Negations and fight through multiple counter spells or lightning helixes on my hard evidence and still able to go off just because these Pact of Negations are so good in this deck. So Valakut Awakening, again, it's going to allow you to tuck these cards under, but I mentioned like it's really dangerous. You can be milled out and lose these off the top of your library. In addition, there are times when your opponent may be tapped out and you're going to, on your turn, you have all the necessary ingredients to go off. You've got the Indomitable Creativity, you've got 5 mana, and you've got 2 tokens to target, and you're feeling really good. There's still a very slight chance on that turn that you could draw the Sage or draw the Locust God, and that's just no good because you want them to be in your deck so you can pop them off both into play with the Indomitable Creativity. So it creates this kind of crazy, volatile gameplay that's always high stakes. It feels like you're like a poker game, and you're like the flop's getting turned, and everyone's holding their breath to see what card it is because you don't want to draw these cards, and your opponent is in the dark to all this. They have no idea that this is going on, but it just creates some really stressful yet fun, crazy deck to play, really. And it's just so powerful how we can so consistently find these cards and execute the combo. So Valakut Awakening, again, it's tucking your cards, important for that, but we can use this even when we don't need to tuck the creatures back into the library. Maybe we just need to fish to find Indomitable Creativity, or find, again, ways to create the ammunition to make the combo go off. So this is a good card just to fish and find more cards. Generally, if I just don't have the combo and I've got useless cards in my hand, I will just pitch them at opponent's end step and just go dig and try to find more things. So also along those lines, moving along to the last 3cc card in the deck, we've got 4 Solve the Equations. I'm all in on this card right now. 4 copies. Yes, I understand it's a little bit slow, but we are all in on the combo here, and this is essentially, most of the time, you're almost always going to be using this to search up Indomitable Creativity if you don't already have one, unless there are pressing needs that you need some other card. Maybe you already have the creativity, but you just are lacking one artifact to go off, and you actually have to go search for a hard evidence or a strike it rich. Or, depending on the situation, you may already have the combo, but you're up against control or something. You're worried you're not going to be able to push the combo through because they've got disruption of their own. It is very pertinent and totally fine to go search up a Pact of Negation if you're not under any pressure to win the game immediately, and you can help prepare so that when you do go off, you can actually force it through. So Solve the Equation is good, in my opinion. 4 copies. Again, it's mostly just acting as a virtual 8 copies of Indomitable Creativity, just to make the combo that much more redundant and finding and doing this. And just in the couple dozen games I've played, I can tell you I have made a lot of Locusts already, and ended a lot of games and opponents where they believe they are about to beat me, and you just get the combo and rip it out of nowhere, and it's so satisfying to just win when you're up against the wall and you can just win out of nowhere with this combo is really powerful. So only 2 more cards to cover, really. I'll save the Storm's Wrath. First, let's just cover Magma Opus. This is another card along the lines of Strike It Rich and Hard Evidence, just to create more treasures. It's rare that we're going to get to a game where we're going to hard cast this sucker for 8 mana. If we have to, in a really tough grinding game, this is our only other avenue towards victory if the combo has become broken. It's unlikely we're going to win with this thing. It's mostly just in the deck to facilitate further treasure tokens. So you're discarding it to create a treasure token on turn 2. Most of the time just during your opponent's end step so that they're more in the dark about what you're trying to do and just to keep up mana for instants like Fire Prophecy, etc. But that's really the main reason the Magma Opus is in the deck. It's just to create further treasure tokens. So lastly, we'll get to the 3 Storm's Wrath. If there's really any card that I'm still playing with or slot, it's this slot, this 3-card slot here. Been experimenting with different things. I've kind of changed the numbers of Pact of Negation is another card that's maybe on the fence about as the numbers. Maybe this card and this card. The rest of the deck, in the 20-something games, probably more than that, I've played with this already. I stand by a lot of these choices. I think just make a lot of sense. I've never not liked getting Strike It Rich. It just enables the combo to go off so quickly and consistently. But yeah, Storm's Wrath and the number of Pact of Negations is I can certainly could debate and discuss further. But Storm's Wrath, a lot of times you see decks, they have, like I said earlier, they have a half and half disruption, half trying to find the combo and execute the combo. So Storm's Wrath is further my disruption package, creature control. But the reason I've chosen Storm's Wrath is because this deck is susceptible to fast aggro. We need a way to clean all that up, and this does it. It's essentially a Wrath of God. Kills most of the creatures you're going to see early, wipe the board. But the clause of dealing 4 damage to a Planeswalker I think is really important here. If you look at the combo closely, there are certain things that can mess and disrupt our combo. There's many things actually, but one of them is actually a Planeswalker, Narset. Now Narset makes it so your opponents can't draw more than 1 card in a turn, so that totally shuts down our combo. So Narset is a big problem, and being that we don't have any natural way to kill Narset, we don't have any creatures that we can just attack and kill Narset with. A 0/3 crab's not going to do anything. Our Fire Prophecies can't even hit a Planeswalker. They can only target creatures. So we need something to deal with Narset because it's a popular enough card that you're going to see it. You want to deal with it. It's not like we want to be so polarized and run a card that just only kills Narset. So Storm's Wrath hits a lot. Obviously, it's going to hit every creature aggro deck. This is going to do a ton of work, but it's also just going to clean up pesky Planeswalkers that are good and we need to get them off the table, or worse, they just totally disrupt and stop our combo. So Storm's Wrath fits the bill there. It kills Narset, but also there's other Planeswalkers that are a pain in the ass as well. I'm just blanking on names, but the Planeswalker that mills 4 cards that you often see in Reanimator decks, a lot of times they mill themselves, but some people will try to mill you with that Planeswalker, and they'll exile your graveyard as well. We don't really care about our graveyard being exiled. We don't have a lot of value coming out of our graveyard just to Strike It Riches, but it's not critical or imperative. But getting milled can be potentially disastrous. Like I said earlier, like if you're up against a rogue deck or something that mills you, you have to just sweat bullets every time you get milled because you're watching and hoping these cards don't get milled off the top. But Storm's Wrath will kill that Planeswalker as well, which can be a problem and does see significant play in Historic and Reanimator and other control decks. So Storm's Wrath, solid card. Even if it didn't hit the Planeswalkers, I still think it would possibly be something you want to run here just to deal with aggro decks and clear the board and be able to survive to execute your combo. But the fact that it can hit the planeswalkers as well is just awesome here. So this is a card I've been happy with so far. I'm sure I'll still experiment with this deck. But that's the deck in a nutshell. Like I said, a lot of people have gone a lot more disruption, and I kind of like just the polarizing, grinding aspect of just going all-in combo. Like, I'm going to find the combo as fast as possible. And I talked earlier, like, some of the best decks, they either disrupt other decks or they don't have any disruption at all, like elves, but they're just so consistent and consistently have enough things to win as early as turn 4 with lethal damage that they're just good enough that way. So that's what I've tried to do here. I've tried to make this deck as consistent as possible in a vacuum goldfish environment where your opponent does nothing. This deck wins on turn 4 very, very consistently the way I've configured this. With the Strike at Riches, you have the ammunition, you've got the 4 Indomitable Creativities, ways to further find them. And we even talked about earlier that you can win even as early as turn 3 with a God draw and multiple Strike at Riches on turn 2. But even not in a vacuum, again, I already highlighted that you can still fight through counter magic and disruption with Pact of Negation. And before we wrap up, I'll just leave one final thought. When you are going off, it's important to look at your opponent's deck, what they're playing. Generally speaking, I want to target 2 artifacts with Indomitable Creativity rather than the creature, just because usually decks, not all the time, but they usually have the odds of them having a card to kill a creature versus an artifact are greater. So you're a little bit safer to target the artifacts depending on what deck you're playing. It's not always true. But again, sometimes it doesn't even matter if you've got backup Pact of Negations. It doesn't matter what you target because you can just, if they do try to disrupt the combo, you can just counter their disruption. So the deck's pretty hot. I've really liked it so far. It's just very, very straightforward in what we're trying to do here. But you get to see a lot of cards with all these like cycling effects and stuff and ways to discard cards to get different cards. You are going to find this like in just a few games. It's surprising if you can't go off. Like, you're gonna be making mass locusts and kill people with this. And I'm surprised this deck, I see it from time to time high up in the ladder, but it seems still kind of fringe. I don't know why it's not more popular because I think it's very solid. It can beat anything. When you have a deck this just on raw power that's this powerful, you can certainly beat anything. Lately I've talked about these ramp decks, which I still love, like the Jacob Hawken ramp deck or traditionally colorless ramp decks. Those decks are awesome as well. They do really powerful things, but they can't do crap against this. They don't have counter spells. Who gives a crap if they've got a Ugin, Planeswalker, whatever, some bomb card? Like, when you're just winning on the 4th turn with infinite hasty insects, there's nothing they can do, and you just kill them. So sometimes a deck like this is just what the meta calls for, where you just say, screw everyone else, screw whatever other deck is doing. I'm just going to do my thing. I'm going to do a powerful combo, and good luck. If you can beat that, you got me, but I've got ways to defend the combo as well. So super powerful deck, something to try out if you haven't. I've been really surprised with how powerful it is, and it's a scary deck to play against as well because you don't know what your opponent has, but you can see all of this material on the board, the treasure tokens, the crabs, and in the back of your mind, you're just always worrying. It's like, oh God, that they're gonna get the Indomitable Creativity and they're gonna go off and they're gonna kill me, and hopefully that is what goes on. But that's the deck, guys. Let me know what you think. Again, like, subscribe for more content like this. I'll probably put out a gameplay video soon. I'm gonna continue grinding with this and see what it can do, see if I can go higher and get ranked. But appreciate you watching to the end. Let me know what you think of the deck, and as always, good luck on the ladder, guys. Peace.